ideas about life are encapsulated or manifested by forms and colors. So somehow, although I'm not a specialist of art, I was very influenced by art. I studied a little bit history of art, and I worked also in a school of cinema in Paris. So I've got an interest for visual art. And for me, the topic of figuration was a good way to enter and to understand better the question of life. So let me briefly introduce myself. So I was first trained as a philosopher. I also had some formation, some training in history of art. I didn't put it here, but it was one of my interests. And then I changed the direction of my research to prepare a PhD in anthropology. And I am now a permanent researcher at the CNRS, which is the National Research Center in France. And I'm based at the Maison Française d'Oxford for 3 years. I have conducted different fieldworks for the last 20 years in Amerindian societies on biotechnologies, that is to say, DY bio, bioart, biobanking, modeling of life. And somehow that's why I stress that I'm not a specialist of bioart, but for me, bioart is one of the many activities in which humans are interacting with living beings and with different purpose. I've got 2 new projects for a few years, one on living and livable cities and quality of life. And last but not least, one project on astrobiology and space exploration. And as you can understand, what is for me the key question is this topic of life in different societies. This is why I have created a team in a very important laboratory in France, which is a laboratoire d'anthropologie sociale, the laboratory of social anthropology, which was created by Lévi-Strauss. And I have, in this very big and huge laboratory, I've got my own team, which is anthropology of life, and with senior researchers and doc and postdoc, we engage a collective and comparative investigation on the relation between socio-technical context and the many conceptions. Yeah, but I cannot see it in my screen. So, okay, attends. Yeah, no, right, okay. So, ok, merci. Voilà. Ah oui, yes. Okay. So, and what is particular with this team is we conduct fieldwork investigation both in so-called traditional societies, but also in laboratory of science. And so far, we've organized more than 15 conferences and workshops, 50, and published more than 15 books and special issue. I don't want to enter in the detail, but I want to underline that here, this special issue published in 2017 was published in a Japanese journal, which name is Nature Culture. It's a journal created by Professor Naoki Kasuga in Tokyo University. So we published the 4th issue of this journal under the title Life Under Influence. So it's online, you can find it easily. So I will not enter in the detail, but here, this publication, there are 2 kinds of publication. One on conception of life in Oceania, Andes, Mesoamerica, or Oceania, and the other one, conception of life in practices related with synthetic biology, biomimicry, or robotic. And my last book, which was just published a few months ago, and I am preparing now the translation in English. The title is Ce que les humains font avec la vie, What Humans Do with Life. And it is a kind of synthetic view on all this project, and also an attempt to define what is anthropology of life. But I keep this for the end if we have time and patience. I calculate more or less 1 hour and plus discussion. So I want this moment to be a moment of sharing ideas, and I don't want to put a heavy theoretical element, but well, maybe we have some time to discuss, which is more a discussion among anthropologists. But so what I want to underline is why the figuration, was the visibility, was the visualization were so important in my research. And here, yeah, it's also a project I want to mention. It's a project with colleague at UCL in London. It's a project on space exploration on the topic of Earth Atlas. So we've put together, we brought together 40 researchers, anthropologists mostly, to understand how anthropology can give ideas to better understand what is to develop space exploration project. And here again, we have designed a very interesting website. We are going to publish a coffee table book because we think that the visualization of our ideas is also something important. And one of the proof of this is in the wake of the conference that Hideo were mentioning, I have created a collective of artists and scientists. Well, the two artists are Lia Giraud and Dominique Pesson, and with chemists and biologists. And so it is an association that is trying to propose a project of exhibition, but it was just submitted at the moment of COVID, so the project is still not alive. But well, who knows? And I will show you some images of two books I've published with colleagues. One on which I'm very proud, about which I'm very proud, is Puissance du végétal et cinéma animiste. So the title in English is Power of the Vegetal and Animistic or Animist movie or cinema. It is about how video and cinema and photography can reveal the vitality of plants. And well, I will present this in a moment. Just briefly, I want to show what kind of field work I was doing 20 years ago. So I was conducting a field work exploration in Mexico, in the state of Oaxaca, and I was observing and also performing activities of sacrifice of poultry, turkey or chicken. I did myself, I practice this. So the ritual was to ask health or security of prosperity, and it consists on cutting the head of the animal and to spread blood in this kind of offering that are made for the god. I just mentioned this because I won't enter in the detail of the rituality, but I just want to highlight that when I was performing this ritual in a church, when I was seeing the yellow of the egg, the red of the blood of the animal, I was immediately thinking that I was doing something similar to Jackson Pollock doing painting. So the visual part for me was very important at that moment. So it was a connection with Occidental Western art. But then I discovered that this display was a miniaturization of the landscape and was a way to show what is the view of the god when they observe a field from above. So my comprehension of the activity of the gods was to also analyze the visualization device that is made at that moment. So I follow this this kind of techniques in different fields in Peru, and try to understand how humans are developing a domestication of the landscape, but through processes of miniaturization. So it was an important part of my reflection to know that miniaturization and the fact to observe a small object is a way also to have the possibility to intervene at a more general level. So here it is a very famous stone in Peru, which is a miniaturization of the landscape, and which is also a way to build and to domesticate the environment. In that framework, I also have conducted fieldwork in Biosphere 2, which is one of the most iconic venue in the world, where in the 80s, researchers and in the US were trying to build a kind of second Earth, because the name is Biosphere 2. Biosphere 1 is the Earth, and this one is Biosphere 2. And they were trying to survive in this environment. And again, my point of comparison was to understand how human techniques are used to mimicry what is vital processes. And since that period, I was always thinking how, I mean, my main question of research is how human techniques are used to intervene to domesticate living beings at different scales, from the molecular scale to the ecological scale, but also how techniques are used to mimicry or to imitate living systems. And when I was in Japan 10 years ago, because I went in 2014, that's why I've published then the special issue. I also pay special attention to all this art of domestication of nature, which is a way also to reveal the vitality of which is present in the plants. As I was interested by the figuration, I was selected for a postdoc at the Musée du Quai Branly, which is a museum of ethnographic art in Paris. And I organized a very important, at least for me, conference on the topic Living Beings and Artifacts, the interweaving of vital and technical processes. And it is at that moment that for the first time, I put together specialist of Mexico, specialist of Oceania, and I have invited Eduardo Kohn to present his work, because my claim was to say that despite the difference, the huge differences between bioart and some ritual, for instance, in Oceania, we are always dealing with intervention on living beings with aesthetic purpose, and also with a social motivation or a social impact. So the aim of this workshop was to overcome the dichotomy between living beings and artifacts. It's so easy to distinguish, as cognitivists do, these two spheres. And for human, we are more dealing with a situation in which we are totally transforming living beings, and our very vitality is totally connected also with a lot of technical extensions. So what I defend in the special issue here in the text, which title is Life as a Making, is that in a lot of societies, it's possible to detect some situations in which humans, to understand better life, will compare life with a technical process. So it's a common analogy to say that life is as a technique. But it has also an effect. It's not just an idea. If you consider that life is as a technique, it will very often implies that you will act on living beings as if they were artifacts. For instance, if you have a comparison of that an organism is like a machine, it implies also that you will open the possibility to intervene in the organism and to treat it as a machine. And it is also the case with the synthetic biology. I mentioned the very famous paper of NG, well, I will find the name, but where there is a metaphor between electrical circuit, Drew and G, yeah, between electrical circuit and organism. So if you got that metaphor, it's not just a metaphor, it is also a way to open an action. And I think it is at the core also of metaPhorest. And so I think interesting to present this very interesting book by my colleague Ludovic Coupaille, who is a specialist of Oceania. He has conducted long-term fieldwork among Abella of Oceania, of Papua New Guinea, and he observes how this population is displaying yams at the end of the season. So there is a display of the yams. They are painted. They are also, they put ornament, and there is a kind of evaluation of the gardeners, which are observing this object as an exhibition. So it is art. It is art with social implication, with moral implication, because if you've got a beautiful yam, it means that you are a good gardener. You have established a good connection with gods. If the yam is not beautiful, you are not such a good gardener. And what is very important in the theorization of Ludovic Coupaille is, as the title underlines it, we are dealing with growing artifacts. So this book is an attempt to overcome the dichotomy between living beings and artifacts, to show that these objects are both living beings, but also they are artifacts. So it is this kind of a topic that we try to define or to observe in many places, because there are, in my view, a situation on which there is this interweaving between living being and vital processes and technical processes. So here are a good example in Amazonia, given by researchers such as Els Lagrou and Fernando Santos Granero, showing that the way you treat the body is a way to somehow to build it as an artifact. But the way you will draw some painting on an artifact is also a way to make it being alive. So again, it is this kind of situation in which there is the boundaries between life and non-life are totally blurred. And obviously, in that conference, I have invited Eduardo Katz, who has presented also this project Genesis that you obviously know. And my interpretation of this work differs from an interpretation from history of art or my artists themselves. And also I had some discussion with Eduardo, because when he presents his work, he just presents his work as in a very subjective way. He presents his work as a work that doesn't have to be contextualized in a very broad framework. It's just you want to put one stone in the history of art. And my view is more to compare this kind of interweaving between vital processes and technical processes with the many activities which are, let's say, aesthetic, but also with social implication. So I adopt a very anthropological view on this kind of things. And on this, I think a very important reading for me was this book by Georges Gesser, Green Light, which is both a reflection on the practice of this researcher and artist, which was creating this Iris project. So it is both a reflection of on his own practice, but also a reflection of the fact that bioart is a kind of activity which can be connected with very traditional practices, and he uses a notion of bio-folk art, saying that before the birth of bioart, obviously we were there are example of bioart, which are precisely the thing that I'm working on. So when you study human interaction with the living, you do not just discover practices that implies utilitarian goals, but there are also aesthetic motivation that can be used. And it is precisely what I try to deal with. So one question obviously is to, I mean, one approach of relation between living being and aesthetic is to say that there is among the living realm, among animals, there is an aesthetic activity. Among animals or vegetal, we can observe productions of forms and colors, but also perception of forms of color. So this kind of example of nuptial dances by birds can be interpreted as proto-bioart. I mean, art performed by the non-human living, but which are both artists, but also observers, no? But what is more of my interest is how humans are really trying to reshape, to make evolve the forms of life, and to play with colors, to play with forms, to play with texture. And I think here there is a very interesting avenue for comparative research, no? So I want to briefly show you some example of a collective book we've published with a colleague in France on the topic of to reconfigure the living. And here you will see that it is a way to really try to capture the very the complexity of the conception of life among different societies. For instance, here we start this book with a good example of a practice of the Zafi manieri of Madagascar, which are studied by Maurice Bloch, a famous anthropologist. And he explains very aptly how these houses of the Zafi manieri are conceived as the transformation of trees in which people think there are vitality in the tree, and they want to keep the tree, I mean, this vitality of the tree, a kind of material energy, they try to conserve it in the house. So there is this kind of observation make us think that to understand technical of the living or intervention of the living, you don't have just to observe animals or plants. You can observe also something which is really an artifact. But according to the vernacular category, this artifact is totally considered to be alive. Obviously, according to different category as we use, but so it is the same with this canoe of population of the west coast of North America, studied by Marie Mosé. And there is the same idea from the cedar. They extract the vitality of the cedar, and this boat is considered to be alive with the power of the tree. And in addition, you can also analyze the fact that the power of painting or drawing is also a way to animate this artifact. So eventually, you've got a twofold transformation from the tree to the boat, and with the idea that the boat is still maintaining alive something from the tree. And also there is a kind of animalization of this artifact through the painting, because for the sailors, there is the idea that the boat is moving as an animal. So there is this, obviously we are dealing with both material, but also very symbolic dynamics. So it's the same with all the situation of shrines, where you will have both object and also element of blood and biomaterial that are used to produce effigy and to have a connection with gods. It's another example by the Inuit. Here it's an example of investigation on shamanism in Panama by Paolo Fortis. And he explains how the wood carver are using the wood to foster or to extend the power of the shaman. So these anthropomorphic figures are like a lieutenant for the shaman. They are helping him when you want to cure someone. But here again, you've got the same ideas. The strength of this artifact comes from the trees and the wood which they are made. And there is also a chapter very interesting about what is the degree of vitality of these very strange artifacts that the Western tradition has introduced in museum. What is the meaning of these elements, these dead animals that are also presented as if they were alive. So here we have a kind of analysis of also the renewal of the new way to display this kind of taxidermic object, trying to give the illusion of movement, of life. And, so here, what is the point is to say that when you want to address the symbolic construction of vitality in different societies, you should also have a look of what is the more common in a Western society, the museum, and try to analyze why it is so important to have this display of animals and to keep them somehow alive. No? So it is a kind of reverse view that anthropology can provide. So here it's another special issue that you can find online. Part of the chapters are in French, but some of them, they are also translated in English, so you can have a look. So it was on the topic of biomimicry. What we wanted to say is all the discourse is about biomimicry and the so-called solution founded in nature. Somehow there is a way to say that it is totally new, and we wanted to show, on the contrary, that the activity to imitate life, and again, I'm still drawing on the same reflection of how life and techniques are mirroring themselves, how you understand life through techniques, how techniques is making understand life. And so we wanted to bring together researchers from different fields to show how a lot of societies try to observe nature and to imitate animals or plants. And so here, for instance, we've got a good example in Mongolia of practices of humans, I mean adolescents, when they want to train, they want to demonstrate they are strong, and well, they incorporate somehow the behavior of deers, reindeers. So what is interesting to underline is here the fact that when you say that humans are imitating an animal or a living being, it's always a very complicated process because it is both a technique of the body which is involved, it is both a manipulation of some artifacts, and it is also always a social practice. So it's not just a relation with nature, it's always a way to create something for human life. In that case, how do you become a man in a society in Mongolia? How this imitation of animals is a way to demonstrate something more, no? It was the case also of a chapter of by Jean-Baptiste Exer, who is working on how the Mursi people of Ethiopia are both changing their body, they are painting it, they are changing the form of the skin of the I don't remember the name, but well, you see that there is an intervention both on human bodies, but also on the cow or the bulls. And here the idea is we can say that it is a kind of folk bioart, no? And but what the author suggests here is the fact that there is not only a kind of imitation between, on one part, the human and the other non-human. There is an attempt to create one community. That's why there is the same drawing here and here. So we are dealing with very serious thing. It's not just aesthetic, it's always politics. So how you want to build your relation with non-human living beings? What is the extension of human society? So this issue is kind of a very universal issue.
Do they think that how do they say, doing this carving the same shape it, or they feel that they are in the same group membership? Or?
Yeah, yes, there is this idea that there is a very strong community identity between your animals and yourself, your group. So there is a kind of fragmentation of the group. So one family will have an identification with their animals, and the other family will have another identification. So there is differentiation between different groups,
Right.
but each group somehow is composed by human and bovine. And one way to organize this collective identity is to to transform the bodies, the organic body, no? There is also examples in Papua New Guinea with, well, it's interesting. Who was a student working with a mask with bees? Yeah. So here also there is the idea that you are these children here. They use some plants in order to, well, achieve a kind of communication. Or your example also of the mouse, no, is there is something like this, not to extend your skin with this element to adopt the standpoint of the animal. Because in this part of the world, according to Florence Brunois, there is the idea that you have your life here, but you've got a double life, another life with where you are connected with other animals. So it's good to develop the capacity to understand the standpoint of animals. And so even here, this child trying to connect with the bat is a way to also adapt the point of view of the bat. No? So that's why it's important to have these ethnographical elements, because it helps us to avoid imagining that what we discovered just now in Japan or in France is totally isolated. On the contrary, I think they are very common things that. So we've got also some interesting papers on the imitation of animals by a robotician. Because also here, obviously, this object is not alive through a biological form, but what we try to tackle here is how the observation of living beings is opening to the elaboration of new devices. And here you've got very funny, if I may say, robot lobsters that are made by military in the US. So maybe before I present the element of this book, if you want to ask some questions or to.
So I have a question. So in a presentation, human use or mimic nature, I want to ask that which position is human? So I think is human intervene nature one-sidedly or some interaction with nature?
Yeah, if I understand well, your question is, you are never totally just human. You are always in a co-elaboration of a world with like the boundary between living beings and artifacts is not so clear. Obviously, the boundaries between the human lives and non-human lives is not so evident, no? Or between someone alive or someone dead is not evident. So yeah, we are composed with all these elements of modification and differences. But yeah, I mean, obviously I use the word human as a generical word, but it's we are dealing with a humanity full of potential identity, both cultural but also multi-specific, no? And but just to clarify one point, because there is a lot of work and kind of fashion around what we call the more than human anthropology, the fact that anthropology or philosophy should describe a more than human reality, which is a reality of animals, plants, insects. And so even if I think it's important to describe how we interact with these elements, for me, at the core of anthropological investigation is the understanding of social institutions. And in my view, institutions are not in nature. I mean, or if you want to imitate the institution of ants or the institution of a forest, and for me, it's a little bit a matter of concern. I think what is really happening with humanity is a capacity to create different world and different institutions. So, well, that's why I'm a little skeptical about more than human approach.
Thank you.
So no, I want to. So all the example I gave. So I'm sorry, it's not a very structured talk. I didn't want to make. I want to give you like a snapshot and a kind of overview. You know, it's idea, and you can have access to the books, or or even I can send you some fragment. You can translate it, and so this book is. So in the cases I just mentioned, mostly we are dealing with situations in which humans are interacting with living beings, and they are transforming the organism to express some potentiality. And when I say express, is also because there is something artistic or aesthetic with this expression. Here we are going to deal with something different, which is how the way you observe organism and how you reproduce the observation, how you produce a visualization without changing directly the organism, is creating a new relation with the object. So I will give you an example in a moment, but it is the idea that through cinema and photography, you've got the possibility to reveal something at the core of organism and reveal vitality. And so in this book, I've got, there is a chapter of Ludovic Coupaille, which I just mentioned with the yam, saying that it is a proto-photographic display. And here I've got the same kind of analysis after the fieldwork of Émilie Letouzet, who is a French anthropologist, who has conducted a fieldwork in Osaka among associations who which tries to make glycine grow, even when they are not grow, but to bloom. And there is here kind of calendar of the moment of blooming. For you, it's totally normal, but for us, it's very exotic. I mean, in France. No? And my interpretation of this is when you schedule that at that moment you are going to observe this living being, for me, it's a way to make art. You know, obviously, it's not a direct intervention always, although when the plant is not blooming, the association is producing an action. But my point is here to say that the relation with the living form and the living color can be compared with a situation of spectacle, of display, of cultural, social gathering. And it is like the yam I was just mentioning. So there is another example of an historian of photography who explain how in the 19 photographers were using plants and sometimes animals to produce directly images on their skin or on the surface. So this example are more artistic examples, but she explained very aptly how the first experimentation in the 19th century using a fruit as a photosynthetic surface. And there is a lot of experimentation with this. Also with the skin of the lamb, which can be also produce a kind of drawing because of the thunder. And I want to show you this small video, if it works. And I think it will work. Video of Jean Commandon on about the growth of the vegetals, 1929. I don't know if you know this kind of videos. So Jean Commandon was a scientist who was using a new technique, the cinema, to capture the natural world. So he took some footage in the sea, but also with the vegetables. And what is very interesting, and it is the claim of Teresa Castro, who is a colleague with whom we have published this book, is at the same moment the cinema is used as a scientific objective device to try to understand what is living being or what are living beings. At the same time, the very effect produced by close-up or by the time lapse, this produces a new gaze on the living being, and it reveals a vitality in the vegetals. Because as you may know that in the French, I mean the European, the Western tradition, animals were supposed to be alive, and plants were supposed to be of not so alive, or with a very lower vitality. Using this kind of video is a way to show a kind of hidden vitality. So here again, the art is and a very important movie was made in that period by Max Reichmann. And here there is not just a scientific movie, there is an artistic movie which tries to use the cinema as an expressive tool, and to make not only give the impression of being alive, but also to give the impression of an expression of an interiority. So there is another step of animism. It's not just to show the aliveness of plants, but it's to show that they are behaving as themselves. So here arts is not just is trying to create an effect through editing, through close-ups, through time-lapse, and these examples are very interesting, and they are at the core of this book, which is I wish I could translate it in English, because in France it's a quite of great success, because we've got very beautiful illustrations. So in that case, it's how you use a living being to print it on a paper, so very old technique. So I don't enter in details, but it is this kind of stuff we wanted to integrate in the book. With this idea again, it is also, I think, at the core of the bioart. Bioart is not just how you modify the organism, it is also how you use the media to change the gaze on the organism. And that's why when you discuss with bioartists, you can clearly have a clear distinction between both. I mean, there are researchers which are very focused on the living process, and there are others which are fascinated by media. And I think they don't have the same background. For instance, Oron Katz is someone who more connected, in my view, at the beginning, at least, with media. And there are other artists that are more connected with the actual vital stuff, no? So this is more or less what was my my own elaboration through the years, and it's when we organized in 2017 this wonderful workshop, Life at Work, New Ecologies, Bioart, Biodesign. And it was such a great moment where Hideo presented us his work, and it was really a great success. A lot of colleagues told me, but how did you find this guy? It's so inventive. No, I mean, for the Parisian, it was really something so it was a very great moment. We were 15 researchers, and I don't mention all the researchers, but also Ivan Enriquez working with, again, what was matter of interest here is how you connect living beings with technical devices, and obviously Oron, Katz, and Yonazur were there, and we had a lot of discussions with them. Lia Giraud, who is a French bioartist, although she doesn't really categorize herself as a bioartist, but she at that time she was producing plants that were learning to interact with music. So Lea is she's someone very inventive also. Eduardo Katz was also there. I mean, we had really very big stars at the time, and also a big fight between them about with somehow the first to coin the word bioart, but it was really a moment of great discussion. I want to mention also that at that time I met for the first time Nicolas Novin, who was, because he died 1 month ago. That's why I wanted to say a word of his work. And he died very young. He was 47 years old, and heart attack. And he was very inventive anthropologist, working on all this interweaving between vital and technical processes. So as you can see here, there is both a bird and a drone. So his book, The Bestiary for the Anthropocene, is full of this kind of situation in which it becomes difficult to say if you are dealing with a living being or with an artifact. So he was also a great contributor of this conference, and and also Dominique Pesson, who she's someone also very inventive. In that case, she was using a DNA, which is often DNA is often a metaphor for a lot of things, and it is what is a metaphor usually is a helicoid form, which is a metaphor for a lot of things. But the very materiality of DNA very often is not really taken into account. So what Dominique did in that case, it was to use a banana to extract the DNA. So I didn't know that we could extract DNA. And to extract DNA in order to make some dolls. So here again, there is an attempt to use living fragments to create a discourse, to create a form, because obviously in bioart, you don't just have the modification of forms and color. You've got also a poetical and a political discourse, a way to say something about the world, to say something about the power of art. And it is why, for me, bioart is really a field that is interesting to observe, no? And I also mentioned the work of Robin Meyer. He wasn't participating in the conference, but he was invited. And he had a very interesting way to try to observe and capture. They are not crickets. They are, I don't know.
Firefly.
Ah, yeah. And so the artwork or the performance here is an attempt to put 100 of these insects in musical and also it's music and light, and he tried to create a synchronicity between the machines and the living organism, which has a lot to do with the project of your you have with crickets, no? And well, I will not enter in too much details because I've got some slides on bioart, but I just want to mention this because he was someone we met at Symbiotica, Guy Ben-Ari. In that case, he had, at that time, he had elaborated a very complicated device, but also performing, which was after the extraction of some cell of his skin to achieve a reprogrammation of the cell skins into neurons and to connect the neuron to I don't know the word in to connect to multi-electro device that produces sound. I mean, somehow there are sounds produced by vital fragment, no? So the name of the performance is Self, because it's an attempt for the artist to play with himself music. So I thought it was a very inventive way to deal with the materiality of life and to create a discourse. But here again, and I will finish with this point, I think that the matter of concern here is how you extract living fragments to make them present in art performance or artwork. But I think at the same time, there is a kind of hesitation among artists or bioartists about the necessity to have actual living organism in your artwork. So in that case, Oran Katz, when I was observing this, he was creating this triptych of dissolved immortality. So in that case, you've got 3 bioreactors in which actual cells are cultivated. But what I want to stress here is the living beings, they are there. It is important that they are there, but they are not really on display. So there is a kind of hesitation between the fact to show or to hide what is really inside. And there is also a play in all the exhibition, because you were there also to attend the exhibition, about the fact that for some bioartists, at some point, and it's also the claim of Oron, sometimes you can also say that something is alive, and even if it is not alive, it's still art. So I think there is also, I mean, the artistic gesture is also to play with life until a kind of limits, when you can also make the audience have an hesitation about if the fact that you are in front of something alive or not. So that's the point I wanted to underline, because like all the example I gave you are somehow blurring the boundaries between living and non-living. I think it is also at the core of the bioartistic endeavor. So I stop here because I think it was a good overview of what I want to, I mean, how I deal with the topic of life and techniques.
Thank you. Very interesting views and consider life and ourselves and also the relationship including non-human existence, not only the organism but also the artifacts. And probably I already told you, but what I got very interested in second club is somehow very related with Yato, because in the second club is needs someone you can say finds the artificial clock system in our nature. So without knowing anything about the mechanical clock, one would not find such here.
Yeah.
So definitely the technical I can say the art foresees how to see the nature, and we scientists are no more take biological clock as a metaphor, and they think this is the facts.
Yeah.
But in reality, and this is very epistemologically interesting path to get that idea. And so your talk reminds me of, and actually, so especially in biology, and we how can I say, many notions, biological notions, come from artifacts. For example, the pumping system and heart, or something like that. So, and definitely, as you said, the biologists use technique, some technological tools or objects as a model to explain the living system. And yes, and so it means that tools is already living system, or or so it's very interesting philosophical and anthropological question.
Yeah, no, I think and it's also a question, why do you call your center metaPhorest? Because there is this idea that the metaphor is a very strong tool to organize the world and to play with similarities, but it goes beyond, because it somehow the human thinking is always a way to make metaphor from one level to another one, and so
But also the tool, the artifacts are of course the extension of our imagination and our body.
Uh-huh.
So therefore, it's so and regardless is a metaphor or some mimicry, but using such extension as a model to interpret the world means it's a kind of personification of the world itself.
Mhm.
And so, which is maybe the very basic, how can I say, way of human beings to understand the world.
Mhm. Well, I think the action, human action with the world is connected with a lot of techniques, technical objects. So the very activity of making this object is the first relation with the world, no? And also the way your own body is interacting. So it's normal somehow that we are thinking through these patterns, no? And what is a matter of interest is to see how you will find at different moment of the history a mechanistic interpretation of living beings, which is based on the observation of the level of mechanization of the society.
Mhm.
So it's also interesting to notice, no? And
Oh, thank you for your presentation. And I ask a question. How do you definition of bioart?
yeah,
So your presentation and your paper on life as making, you called exert,
yeah,
and he wrote a biofolk art, like
yeah,
some domestication.
yeah,
So this is a very big bioart program. So
yeah,
some domestication and some bioart has any difference?
yeah,
Which point?
yeah.
So how do you define or definition of bioart?
I will have a very open definition of bioart. For me, I mean, because obviously you can say that art is a very Western category,
Yeah.
and art is connected with an history of art, with a place of exhibition, like museum. So you can also define or different kind of audience. But for me, bioart is any kind of activity which involve an aesthetization of the living beings. So it's very open.
Yeah.
And my contention is obviously that you never just do art. When you do art, you do economy, you do morality. I mean, you involve a moral evaluation, you do politics. And it is both the case in the YAM of the book I've just mentioned, or when you observe a bioartist and and then so for me the definition is not a problem. For me, there is a kind of fight between artists. They want to be the first to say, "Yeah, I have invented the word bioart," and you are a bioartist or not. I am the real bioartist. It's like, you know, in the 20th century, all the topic of manifest, who are saying, well, you've got the surrealism after the Dadaism, then the lettrism, then, and every movement is saying what is the right thing. And if you are not following the manifest, you are outside of the movement. So that's the way artists can define themselves or sell themselves. But as an anthropologist, I just observe this in a very, with a view from afar. And for me, yeah, there is a kind of similarity between the YAM and bioart. It's not the same techniques, it's not the same living beings, but there is something, there is this idea that you try to play with living beings and it's relevant, it's serious, and it's something that is creating power or acknowledgement in your society. So for me, in all these situations we are in dealing with bioart or folk bioart, I don't know really, but
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
in my book I use a word aesthetic of the living,
Oh, yeah.
which is a way to say that, but maybe it's not enough because somehow it's not just the way you perceive the object, is also how you are going to make it.
Yes, thank you for your
Thank
answer. And I remember when I first met Hideo-san, I said, you are very famous bioartist. And he said, I don't like called bioartist.
Yeah.
Oh, bioart is many problems.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, and for instance, I also put some slide of an artist I really like in France, Michel Blasi. I don't know if you know him, Hideo. He is playing with mold and he puts some objects and he lets the Michel Blasi. So he's a well-known artist, and so he puts some shoes or objects in order to let some mold or vegetal grow in them during the exhibition. So Blasi is doing this for 30 years. He will never declare he is a bioartist. It's not, so somehow we need also to be, for me at least, I need to be flexible. What is our interest? Why is he doing this? Because his claim is he want to display, to put on stage the uncertainty of the vital processes and the fact that beyond the artistic agency, there is something more. And I think it's at the core also of all the, because bonsai are also bioart somehow, no? So well, I don't know very well bonsai, but for the few I understand there is both a very high technical intervention, but what you want to show is not only your intervention, is the movement of life. So in the sense, you put on stage something which is not human. So yeah, in that case, he's not a bioartist. And I think, yeah, Oran Katz, he disagree. He will say, I am an artist, but he will not say I am a bioartist. True, no? I think it's so.
He doesn't like to. Yeah.
Yeah.
He sometimes uses biological art.
Yeah.
They're famous bioartists.
Yeah. So yeah, what is your project?
We used to make project about like I want to deliver a dolphin.
Could you repeat?
I want to deliver a dolphin.
Okay.
So it's a kind of conceptual work which is how human female able to be surrogacy mother of the dolphin.
Yeah, no, I saw this obviously. Yeah.
Actually, Olmcat's kind of advised me when I was in the RCA.
Yeah. No, I saw this work, and so you are based in Tokyo?
Yes, no.
Okay. And what is your new project? Are you still working with dolphins or?
Trying to know about artificial wound.
Okay.
So then, yeah, actually, I'm supposed to show a new project today, but actually somehow gallery has stopped. So then it's postponed to the June. So then now I have time to come here.
Okay, well, it's perfect.
So actually, yeah, I'm researching about artificial one, and then like, is there any kind of advice about kind of anthropology kind of point of view
About the women?
about artificial one?
Well, I think that you can investigate in two directions. One would be the history of some scientific devices that are created. But another one would be how do you find in mythology, for instance, some history of artificial ones?
Also, I'm trying to
Uh-huh.
actually like example, actually maybe in Japan, like we can say like and a couple of famous folklore stories, which is maybe is coming up from the plants. Like one is from the fruit and one is from the bamboos.
So it will be artificial, not so artificial in that case, but yeah,
Like,
externalization. Uh-huh.
so yeah, we can find these kind of folklore stories
Yeah,
as
yeah,
our mythology or
yeah,
mythology.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So then, like, I wonder, like, how I can make up artificial worm in out of like, well, it's within the science fiction story
Yeah,
and
yeah.
also kind of more like folklore stories too. And also, I'm trying to design the social system to also not for the, so the artificial worm is supposed to be not for the nation or for the capitalism or not for the red line kind of belief system, and then also not for the I forgot one more thing. Yeah, so then anyway, I think artificial worm gonna be, you know, desired by so many people.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Yeah.
For our workers' needs, not really workers' needs, more like governmental
Yeah,
needs.
yeah. So there's always this risk of biopolitization and yeah, no, I will try to beyond artificial, try to have a kind of typology. Do you mean externalization, or because you can have an externalization and for instance, you can have an externalization of a device who is going to be disconnected from you. So you let your worm at home, or you carry it with you. You know, maybe there is I think a kangaroo is a kind of externalization of the worm. No? And so, you know, it's a very beautiful project. And I hope if you have a mailing list to announce, I would be very happy to know more about this. Although I'm flying back to Paris next week, but and because I know that the International Expo at Osaka is about the topic of biotechnologies. Is there any bioartists involved in this?
Yeah, I know they are trying to kind of garden like a building, but it's not by the bioartist, it's more by the medical, data medical.
Okay.
It's not really biothing. Actually, recently I went to Osaka to see the previous Osaka Banpaku.
Okay.
Like the Expo 70s. Actually, it was quite interesting.
Okay.
If you have time, you should visit. And also inside of the Tower of the Sun.
Yeah. I went there 10 years ago. Yeah.
So this is the tree of life, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Yeah, with the fetishization of the DNA.
From the British researcher give a question framework. Thank you for very much. So I'm wondering that there are various types of animism. So what do you think the power is of multinaturalism and perspectivism, which Castro advocates that fundamentally rethinking the conventional perception of human and nature?
No, it's a very good question. Thank you very much. Well, I think the work of Viveiros de Castro is very interesting precisely to introduce this idea of comparison, no? And to overcome some dichotomy. I am myself more used to the analytical model of Philippe Descola, with more dealing with a kind of four ontologies and tries to develop a more complex somehow view on the complexity, on the diversity of society. But yeah, definitely, Viveiros is very important. And yeah, I would wonder how he will. Well, first, I wonder what will be his theory of life, which is not so clear, although I've got some ideas. But and the second question, how bioart will enter in his system. Can you have a perspectivist bioart? I don't know. Sometimes I understand that also talking with some project of the student today, that there is an attempt to coexist with a point of view of a non-human, no? So in that sense, I can say that there is something similar between perspectivism and some project in bioart. But mostly, I would say that well, it should be an idea that should be tested, but a lot of bioartistic projects, they are dealing positively or negatively with the power of human. They are very centered on the power of human. And well, for instance, a project like yours, Hideo, is maybe very original because in that case, it's more an attention to the fragility of life. It's not just the power. For instance, Eduardo Katz, when he creates the project Genesis, although he's playing with I'm not a god, but he's putting on stage the power of life, no? And the power of human, or the attempt of human to take control of this. In your case, it's more a way to say, well, there is also something vulnerable in living beings. But thank you for the question. Yeah. So thank you, Anais. So it's a very, very. So the question is my view on the anthropologist Elizabeth Povinelli, who critiques the concept of life and animism and develops the concept of geontologies. So it's a very technical question. I've got one section of my last book in which I present the work of Povinelli. To put it in a nutshell, I think she is a good symbol of an attempt of some anthropologists and philosophers to overcome the difference between life and non-life, living being and non-living being. And it's a very theoretical text. And so my view is it is a very important book. And maybe that's what should be a matter to be discussed more, is the fact that to defend this project of overcoming the distinction between life and non-life, she uses two kind of references. One are scientific references, for instance, work on metabolic activities. And the other one are ethnographic data or observations of Aboriginous people of Australia. So what is from my project of anthropology of life matter of concern is how you articulate these different kind of knowledge. But it's a very technical question and I will not enter, but please feel free to send me a mail and we could discuss.
Can you talk on us?
You are also conducting a field work on bioart, no? I think. Is
Sorry, I just mentioned to Hideo in message that
maybe
I
it's very early in Brazil.
got a cold, so my voice is
So
horrible.
I will be in Brazil in Sao Paulo in August. I don't know in which city you are based.
No, I live in Japan.
Ah, she's been in Japan. Ah, okay, so
But yeah, I asked about Povinelli because I worked a lot.
What do you ask related previous discussions?
Maybe they can hear.
So you use a word of nature.
yeah.
I want to ask, if this nature is one, or for example, Brazilian anthropologist Castro
Yeah.
said multinaturalism. So human have human own its nature, Jala have Jala its own nature. Your nature is one or some or have some perspective.
I will not use both nature or multi-nature. I think there is a multiplicity of configurations. And there is an evolution of living systems or of technical innovation and human society. So I'm more, claiming that there is an obvious multiplicity of configurations, and so it's hard to say that there is a nature, no? So if I have to choose, but I don't know who is going to say that there is. Well, there are some philosophers that is still the concept of nature as is still, but yeah, in my view, there is something which has more to do with multiplicity, but it's a technical or pragmatical multiplicity. It's what humans do with life is precisely they create many worlds.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I will agree with Viveros or with Marisol de la Cadena or Anne-Marie Moll.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let me speak English.
Yeah, but thank you for the words in French.
So among different cultures, do you think is there different process of how children get the idea of life? So such process is common in mankind or different from culture to culture?
Yeah. No, it's a very important question. So there is a field of research in what used to be the ethnobiology, and now it is called the folk biology. It is a field of research in which experimentations try to analyze how the cognition of children first will make a category of life forms between animals, vegetables, and all classification, but also will distinguish which is animated or non-animated. And so what is at stake in this kind of research is how can we find universal categorization, no, of living and non-living beings. So obviously there are some principles that may be present when you are, I mean, which are present in the brain. But my contention would be to say that first, the activation will be made among a society, but most of all, I will defend the idea that even if there are natural cognitive principle activated, the way you will think about life is always embedded with technical and social experience. And this is not, so maybe there is a cognitive ground to mix your technical and your social experience with the biological experience. But I think you need to investigate this in the field work, in the field. So there is and that's why there are diversity of conception of life, because there is a diversity of societies. But thank you for the question.
Issue a comment related to this project before
The bioartist,
Uh-huh.
he uses some bacteria.
Daphne.
He do biomedical.
Okay.
So he used to be a very excellent swimmer,
Okay.
competitive swimmer,
Uh-huh.
and his project is to invent a new swimming style, mimicking the movement of Daphne.
So Daphne, what is?
Daphne is the small plankton animal.
Okay, and how do they move? Can you can you show us? They are moving like this? No, no, yeah.
That's right.
Uh-huh. And you try to do this? It's very interesting. You should read a text by an anthropologist, Marcel Mauss, and the text is Techniques of the Body. Very famous text. Marcel Mauss could give you the reference. And so you will organize a performance in the sea or in a swimming pool?
He very interesting point in his project is not only to mimic his movement, but also the environment, the water environment to fit to Daphne. It means that in such a very small organism, the effect of viscosity of the water is much more dominant over the gravity.
Okay.
Therefore,
Yeah.
to fit the Daphne viscosity, he used a swimming pool with a highly viscous water.
Okay.
So
Well, you've got to wait.
like swimming in honey.
Okay, interesting. Wow. So yeah, but I would be very happy to have a look of this on this work. And so there is another question by Anais. asking if it's possible to build a non-colonial anthropological practice. And she mentioned Viveros, Tsing, and Povinelli. So I think that all the examples I gave are precisely a way to decolonize the way we think life. It's a way to say that bioartists who pretend to be just doing something new in the history of Western art, I think that we can adopt a view from afar and recognize the many way to deal with living beings all over the world, and that one of the tasks of anthropology is to recognize the different configurations, which are both aesthetics, politics, and technological. So for me, my project is totally non-colonial in the sense that I do not defend one universal definition, and I try to compare different way to engage with living beings, and also to redefine what is life.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Okay, thank you very much for joining, and thank you for a great talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, online profile, ありがとうございます。Thank you. Bye, and we are closing the Zoom session. Okay, bye-bye.